Right, okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name's Tim Watts. I'm the CEO of Shield Therapeutics. I will not go through the disclaimer in detail, other than to say there are forward-looking statements here which cannot be relied on. So let me first of all introduce you to Shield Therapeutics. We're AIM listed. Our market capitalization at the moment is around the £115 million mark. The company's primary focus is on developing and commercializing a product that we call Ferrocru in Europe. Acriva is the brand name in the US. This is a novel oral treatment for the treatment of iron deficiency in adults. The product is approved in both the US and Europe. We have conducted 3 phase 3 clinical trials which have confirmed the effectiveness and tolerability of the product. In the fourth quarter of 2018, we out-licensed for commercialization purposes the product to Norgine, which is a mid-sized European-based pharmaceutical company, also with a presence in Australia and New Zealand. So they are commercializing for us in those territories. In July of 2019, the FDA approved the product for commercialization in the US. And in January of 2020, we concluded an out-license arrangement to a company called ASK Pharm in China, and I'll touch on all of these later on in the presentation. We also have an additional late-stage asset which we call PT20. It's a phosphate binder for the treatment of hyperphosphatemia, but that does require one further study, and I'm not going to dwell on that in this presentation. The company is, it's a small company. We have about 16 employees with a very experienced management team. We're semi-virtual, by which I mean that we outsource all the heavy lifting, so things like the clinical trials, the manufacturing, and the, as you've seen, the commercialization and marketing. And our cash runway at the moment extends into the first quarter of 2021. Just taking a look at valuation. We have 4 analysts who cover us, and you can see there that the valuations that they all currently have are comfortably above our current market capitalization. They also see a further upside in their valuations as and when we secure a commercialization arrangement for the USA. And Peel Hunt and FinCap have not actually included any value as yet for the China transaction. So I believe that the company today is significantly undervalued. Let me tell you a little bit about iron deficiency and where Ferrocru or Acriva sits in that. So iron is required for multiple functions in the body, and is in particular for the purposes of our interest is a key component of hemoglobin. It occurs in really 2 ways. One, if you don't absorb enough iron primarily through your diet, or if you lose iron through blood loss. So malnutrition, bleeding, and there are a number of chronic illnesses that can lead to iron deficiency, and they would include inflammatory bowel disease, chronic kidney disease, women's health issues, congestive heart failure, and there are others. Iron deficiency is the most common cause of anemia, and that's known as iron deficiency anemia, obviously, IDA for short. And you treat iron deficiency, or the anemia that comes from it, with either oral or intravenous, that's IV, iron replacement therapy. So if we look at the current therapies which precede Ferrocru, essentially the vast majority of patients, when they're first being treated for iron deficiency or iron deficiency anemia, will be treated with oral products. These are essentially iron salts. They are old products, they're therefore generic, so that makes them inexpensive. And because they are oral, they're tablets, they're convenient to take, but they are not well tolerated, and they are, partly as a result of that, the absorption of iron is poor. And they're not well tolerated essentially because the iron salt breaks down as soon as you take it into the body, and the iron that gets freed up as a result of that can chelate. It can cause clumps of iron, which will then cause things like nausea, constipation, and they can damage the gut lining. So the tolerance of iron salts is notoriously poor. And partly as a result of the fact that the iron is breaking down, or the salt is breaking down, it's not well absorbed because not enough iron gets to where it needs to be absorbed in the body, and therefore each tablet of iron can contain up to, and sometimes exceeding, 100 milligrams of iron. So you're talking about a lot of iron per tablet. When patients who need to be treated for iron deficiency fail on oral salts, as many of them do, they've really got two options. Either they just stop treating iron, and therefore if they're not so bad that they can keep going, they just don't get treated, or they go to intravenous treatment. So an intravenous treatment is clearly inconvenient. You need to go into a hospital or a clinic where there are resuscitation facilities, because there is a rare side effect which can cause anaphylactic shock. But because of that, the paradigm requires patients to go into hospital or a clinic where they can be treated safely. And that is clearly inconvenient for the patient, and it's resource heavy, it's costly. The intravenous products, by and large, certainly the ones that are used mainly today, are still relatively new. They are not yet generics, and therefore the drug cost is significantly more expensive than the oral tablets. So the poor tolerability of the salt-based salt-based products, the oral products, and the cost and inconvenience of the intravenous route creates a significant unmet need and a commercial opportunity for Ferrocru. So how does Ferrocru and Acriva fit in this? So Ferrocru is oral, but it is not a salt. It is a chelated structure with an Fe3 plus ion at the center, surrounded by 3 maltol molecules. And maltol is essentially a sugar-like molecule. It's used a lot in the food industry, so it is known to be safe. And the great advantage that this has is that the binding between the iron and the maltol molecules is such that it does not break down until it reaches that part of the body which naturally absorbs iron. But when it does reach that part of the body, if the body needs more iron, the body's mechanism to absorb iron will break the binding of the molecule, absorb the iron, and then the remaining maltol molecules will just pass through and be discharged to the body in the normal way. To the extent that the body doesn't need any more iron, then the whole Fe ferric maltol complex will just pass through the body in the normal way. So you don't get anything like the same amount of tolerance issues because there isn't the amount of free iron in the body. And as a result, the iron is much better absorbed, and therefore our tablets are only 30 milligrams of iron, so much less iron being used in the first place. So where is Ferrocru Acriva best used? We would not argue that patients should be treated with Ferrocru straight away. The existing generic oral salts are cheap, they are convenient, and so it is understandable that doctors are going to prescribe those products in the first instant. And to the extent that patients can tolerate them, then that's fine, and they can be treated that way. But as we've said, many patients suffer from gastric side effects and become intolerant. So the positioning of Ferrocru is for patients who have failed on the oral iron salts before they go into intravenous treatment. And you can see there the key features are that it's low dose, it's taken twice daily, so there's they're capsules you take in the morning and the evening. You get high iron availability from the product, and as we'll see in a minute, it effectively raises hemoglobin and iron levels, well tolerated, and patients on our long-term studies have not required interventional intravenous iron therapy. And the box to the right shows you that we have patent protection until 2035, so we have a long time in which to commercialize the product. So why is Ferrocru competitive? So we've done, as I've said earlier on, we've done 3 clinical studies. The first 2 we show here are what we call the regulatory clinical studies, in as much as these were the 2 studies that were used to gain approval in Europe and the US. In fact, the Europeans approved solely on the basis of the first of these, the inflammatory bowel disease study. The US approval was based on both of these studies. And what you see in the chart on the right from the IBD, the inflammatory bowel disease study, is that over the first 12 weeks of treatment, patients who were on hemoglobin, and there was a placebo arm to this as well, so some patients did not receive Ferrocru. The patients who were receiving Ferrocru saw over the first 12 weeks, saw their hemoglobin rise by in excess of 2 grams per deciliter. And for men, the normalization level of hemoglobin is regarded as around 13 grams per deciliter. For women, it's around 12 grams per deciliter. So you can see a very significant increase in hemoglobin in the first 12 weeks. And then over the 52 further weeks that the study went on, that hemoglobin level was sustained. So the study saw that, and also that the product was well tolerated. In the second study, the chronic kidney disease study, in a different group of patients, slightly different setup, but again, very good increases in hemoglobin levels were seen, and the product again was well tolerated. The hemoglobin did not rise as much because chronic kidney disease patients suffer from a lack of erythropoietin, which is needed to create hemoglobin, and they were not allowed to have stimulating agents which would create more of the erythropoietin. So as they continue to take Ferrocru, that they did not have the ability in the body to convert more of that into hemoglobin. But what we did see was that the iron not used for hemoglobin production was stored in various organs in the body. So again, successful results from that study. We've also conducted a phase 3 head-to-head study where we compared Ferrocru with the leading intravenous iron therapy, and that demonstrated again a very good response at the 12-week point, but also benefit again over the 52 weeks. And what you can see on this chart, the blue bars is Ferrocru, the red bars are the intravenous treatment, and you can see by week 12, there's relatively little difference in the number of responders. That is patients who increased their hemoglobin by around 2 grams per deciliter. And over the 52-week period, very comparable responses between intravenous and Ferrocru. And what our commercialization partner Norgine has shown and presented some posters at a conference by the organized by the European Crohn's and Colitis Organization in February. They've taken the data that came out of that, and one of the things that we saw is that, in fact, I'll go back to the previous chart, is that what you see with an intravenous patient is that they are dosed in the first week of the study, and over the first 12 weeks, the hemoglobin, the iron is used, and the hemoglobin increases. But if a patient then has an ongoing iron deficiency problem, over the next, whatever it is, 10, 15 weeks, their hemoglobin levels, their iron levels will drop, their hemoglobin levels will drop, and they'll get again to the point where they're feeling seriously anemic, and they need to be retreated with intravenous therapy. And we saw that with a lot of the patients in the head-to-head study. And Norgine have taken that data and used that data and calculated that in a German healthcare setting, the average total per patient cost, that's the drug acquisition and the administration, was around 1.6 times higher for the intravenous arm than it was for the Ferrocru arm. So from a health economics point of view, beginning to show that Ferrocru has significant advantages. They showed another poster where they demonstrated the productivity loss associated with administration going on in the clinic, but also the inconvenience and disruption and cost to the patient of travel and lost salary and lost pay and things like that. In terms of the market opportunity, this is a graph presented by Vifor, who own Ferinject, which is the leading intravenous product, and that shows that in 2019, over the course of the year, Ferinject sold over 1 billion Swiss francs, which is essentially the equivalent of $1 billion. So they are the leading product. They've got about half the market. So you can see there's probably a $2 billion market in the intravenous sector at the moment. In the US, more specifically, we estimate that there's something approaching 10 million patients with iron deficiency anemia. You can see there the various disease areas that they occur in. We think there's something like 2 to 3 times that number suffering from iron deficiency without anemia. And you can regard patients who are anemic with iron deficiency as actually being treatment failures for iron deficient patients. Why would you leave them to become anemic before you treat them? So we think there's a huge opportunity here for Ferrocru and Acrifa, which is approved for the treatment of iron deficiency for patients with or without anemia. So in thinking about the US and commercialization, we're running through an out-license process at the moment. We have a sector-specific US advisor who works in this space, broking deals, if you like, between companies with products to license and companies that want products to license. We've had a significant outreach process. We have discussions at the moment with multiple interested parties, and this is a top priority for us. We're working to close a license transaction at the earliest possible opportunity. In China, I said we've done a deal in China. I'll come to that on the next slide. But the iron market in China is still undeveloped. The pharmaceutical market as a whole in China is underdeveloped. But as you can imagine, it is a huge market. And this slide, I'm not going to dwell on it, but we've just tried to do some top-down and bottom-up indications of the sort of size of market that might exist for Ferrocru. So to take the top-down approach, there's a 1.4 billion population. V4 have estimated that something like 20% of the population suffer from iron deficiency anemia. Now, many of those may be in rural China, so may not be that easy to access with the therapies. But if you take some broad percentages, assumptions, 25% in cities, a generous 75% tolerating iron salts, that leaves you still with potentially 17, 18 million patients who could be targets for Ferrocru. And you can just do some sums and say that could come to 300 million annual sales value for the product easily. Coming at it from the bottom-up approach, we can come up with numbers of 300 to 600 million. So you can see this is potentially a very large market. The deal with ASK Pharm that we announced in January, they paid us 11.4 million upfront for the license. They have to get the final approval. That needs one further study in China. Once that's completed, we estimate that's going to take 2 to 3 years. Then there's another 11.4 million payable to us. And then when they launch the product, there will be royalties of 10% or 15%, depending on the level of sales, and $40 million in future sales milestones. And with an eye on the time, I'll just keep going. In Europe, we had launched the product in the very narrow area of anemia with inflammatory bowel disease patients in 2016, but we ran out of cash. And that's one reason why we went to Norgine in the back half of 2018 for them to take over the commercialization. They took over in the first quarter of 2019, and the 2019 volumes were 66% ahead of where they were in 2018. So we've seen a very nice increase in sales volumes since they took over. I should say that at the moment, the product is only sold in Germany and the UK, and the markets in the other big markets, France, Italy, and Spain, the launches are not expected before 2021 because you have to submit for approval, or pricing, I should say, price and reimbursement approval to the authorities in those countries. So that is going to take some time. We have to conduct for both the European and the American authorities a pediatric program. At the moment, the product is approved for adults, and we have just finished formulating a liquid formulation, and that's about to be manufactured. Once it's manufactured, we will then kick off a study which will compare the equivalence of the liquid formulation with the current adult capsule. And once we have checked that, then the main study with children and infants, approximately 110 subjects, will start probably in mid-2021 and take a couple of years. And we think the cost for that is going to be around about £5 million for the whole thing. In terms of financial outlook, we expect some steady growth from Norgine sales in UK and Germany, but as I mentioned a moment ago, we won't see sales in France, Italy, and Spain in 2020. But we have received the 11.4 million, sorry, that shouldn't say development milestone, that should say license milestone. So we have received that already as revenue in 2020. Our G&A cost base will be similar to what it was in 2019. So you look at our accounts and see what that's likely to be. And the R&D expenditure, again, similar to the amount charged in 2019. And as I said at the outset, we have cash going into 2021. So last slide, just to anticipate the news flow. Frankly, it's all about completing a commercialization agreement for Acrifor in the USA. There are other things that we will obviously comment on, but I think the US is clearly the main driver of value at the moment. And then you have just below there the summary. So in order to leave a moment for questions, I will stop there.
And we've got a lot of questions, and forgive me if I jump around a little bit from kind of theme to theme. I want to try and get through some of the key things that have been asked. And whilst you have your presentation up still, Tim, would you mind going back to the broker valuations screen, which was back at the start? And we've had a couple of people ask for a bit more detail on that. Could you talk through how the different brokers are assigning the value in that chart there?
Well, I don't get involved in their detailed valuations. I think for the most part, they have looked at the European market and the US market, and they've made net present value calculations based on their assumptions as to penetration, market share, pricing, and so on. So I think they've approached it from a sort of fairly classic, how many patients, what sort of price, what does that mean for the royalty stream that we will get, and a net present value calculation based on those assumptions for Europe, for the US, and in the case of Edison and Hardman, they've done some calculations also for China.
So the range there is 250 to just over 400. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
The next area is around the opportunity in the States, and it seems I can ask if the US licensing deal drags on. Does that? The question says, does that give your potential partners the upper hand in any deal? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. It has been going on for a while, and we've been again quite clear that the process got started in earnest in September, October of last year. Bear in mind, we got the approval in July. Frankly, we got a better, broader approval than I think the market and commentators were expecting. But we got the full iron deficiency in adults. It wasn't restricted in any way, and I think therefore there was then, of course, that was in the middle of the holiday season, and it's really only after people come back in September that companies started to focus on it. I mean, we have had generated a lot of interest. What you find is that at certain times there are some companies who have a valid interest who can't execute on that interest because they're doing other things. They might have their own product to launch, they might be doing a fundraise or whatever it is, and at different periods in the process, other companies have come in and also dropped out of the process. The other thing I would say to try and begin to explain why it might have taken a long time is that license agreements are complicated because you're striking a deal. In our case, it's going to be a 15-year deal between two companies. 15 years because that's where the patents go out to, between two companies. And so you're trying to come to an arrangement which is going to stand the test of time, and you anticipate all the ups and downs that might arise in an arrangement that lasts for 15 years. So it is quite a complicated and there's a lot that needs to be thought about in coming to a license deal over that period of time. So this is not like doing a straightforward supply agreement for 3 years. It's not even, dare I say it, like doing an acquisition where yes, an acquiring company might need to do a lot of due diligence, but once they've done the deal, they run the show, and therefore there's no need for future dispute resolutions and things like that. So it's more complicated doing a license deal, and I would say that's one of the reasons why it's taking a long time.